I don't know about you, but this off-season just keeps getting more interesting. Every time it feels like things are finally settling down, something new comes up that gets the fan base talking all over again. And this time, we've got some comments that might completely change the way a lot of people look at one of the biggest stories from last season. Plus, there's another move the front office might need to make sooner rather than later if they don't want to regret waiting. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Before we jump in, do me a quick favor. Smash that like button if you're hyped for Vikings football, and drop a SKOL down in the comments if you're a real member of the Vikings family. Let's see how many true fans are watching today. Something about Sam Darnold's latest comments should make every Minnesota Vikings fan stop and think. Not because he criticized the organization, not because he revealed some shocking secret, but because he did exactly the opposite. In a league where players often leave with frustration, disappointment, or even resentment toward their former teams, Darnold took a completely different approach. His words revealed maturity, perspective, and perhaps, most importantly, a clear understanding of why the Vikings made the decision they did. Speaking about his departure from Minnesota, Sam Darnold explained that he understood where the organization was coming from. Instead of questioning the decision or suggesting the Vikings made a mistake, he said everything happens for a reason. He admitted there was a point where he simply accepted that he wasn't supposed to be in Minnesota for another season, and rather than dwelling on it, he shifted his focus entirely toward preparing for the next opportunity in his career. That response says a lot about the quarterback's mentality. Let's be honest. Darnold easily could have taken a different route. After all, we're talking about a quarterback who had an outstanding season with Minnesota. He could have pointed to the wins. He could have reminded everyone about his touchdown production. He could have argued that his performance earned him another year as the Vikings starter. Instead, he chose not to make it about himself. That's the kind of mindset that has defined his journey throughout the NFL. The physical tools were never the question. At 6'3" and approximately 230 pounds, Darnold has always possessed the arm strength, athleticism, and mobility that NFL teams look for in a franchise quarterback. Plenty of quarterbacks have similar physical gifts. What separates players over time is how they respond when things don't go according to plan. Darnold has experienced more adversity than many quarterbacks around the league. His career started under difficult circumstances with the New York Jets. Later, during his time with the Carolina Panthers, he even lost his starting job. Rather than allowing those setbacks to define him, he continued learning and developing. He spent time in San Francisco, absorbing knowledge within Kyle Shanahan's offensive system, while also watching Brock Purdy's development firsthand. Those experiences became part of his growth before eventually arriving in Minnesota. When Darnold joined the Vikings, expectations weren't particularly high. Before the season began, many people viewed him as one of the biggest question marks on the roster. If someone had predicted Minnesota would finish with double-digit wins, while Darnold threw around 25 touchdown passes against 15 interceptions, most fans probably would have considered that a successful campaign. Instead, he exceeded expectations by consistently playing quality football throughout the season. What stood out wasn't simply the production. It was how he handled every situation. There were stretches during the year when his performances weren't at their best. Like every quarterback, he experienced difficult games. But what impressed teammates and observers alike was his ability to stay composed. He never became overly confident after big victories, and he never allowed rough performances to completely derail his confidence. He kept working, trusted the process, and eventually found his rhythm again. That type of consistency reflects leadership, not necessarily the loud, emotional leadership that comes from motivational speeches inside the locker room, but leadership through preparation, professionalism, and daily example. Sometimes those qualities resonate even more inside an NFL building than fiery speeches ever could. Darnold also offered insight into why he believes Minnesota made the decision to move forward with J.J. McCarthy. According to Darnold, modern NFL teams understand the enormous advantage of having a quarterback on a rookie contract. Building around a young quarterback allows organizations to invest significant resources elsewhere on the roster while the quarterback's salary remains manageable. It's a strategy many successful franchises have attempted to maximize, and Darnold acknowledged that reality without hesitation. He also recognized another important factor. When a team spends a first-round pick on a quarterback, especially a player selected 10th overall like J.J. McCarthy, that organization is making a commitment. Drafting a quarterback that high isn't simply about adding depth. It's about believing that player represents the future of the franchise. From that perspective, Darnold admitted he completely understood the Vikings' thinking. Building a talented roster, surrounding a young quarterback with quality coaching, dependable weapons, and a strong supporting cast makes perfect sense from an organizational standpoint. That's exactly the blueprint Minnesota appeared to be following. However, one interesting opinion emerged during the discussion. While agreeing with the overall strategy, the argument was made that the issue wasn't necessarily the process itself, but rather the evaluation of whether McCarthy was fully prepared to immediately take over the offense. Injuries certainly complicated the situation, but the belief expressed was that Minnesota's decision-making process remained logical even if the quarterback evaluation ultimately became a point of debate. And that's what makes Darnold's comments so fascinating. Instead of creating controversy, he offered understanding. Instead of criticizing the Vikings, he acknowledged the business realities of today's NFL. Instead of focusing on what he lost, he focused on what came next. That attitude may ultimately explain why he has continued earning opportunities throughout his career, even after facing adversity that could have broken the confidence of many other quarterbacks. What do you think about Sam Darnold's comments regarding his departure from Minnesota? Did the Vikings make the right decision by moving forward with J.J. McCarthy, or do you believe Darnold deserved another season as the team's starting quarterback? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this conversation is far from over. As interesting as Sam Darnold's perspective was, there's another storyline developing around the Minnesota Vikings that deserves just as much attention, and it involves one of the most underrated defensive players on the roster. While much of the offseason conversation has centered around potential extensions for established names, there's a growing argument that Minnesota should move quickly before another player dramatically increases his market value. That player is Jalen Redmond. The reasoning behind extending Redmond now is actually very simple. The defensive tackle market across the NFL continues to explode. Recent contracts around the league have shown just how valuable disruptive interior defensive linemen have become. Jeffrey Simmons recently signed a massive extension with the Tennessee Titans worth approximately $35 million per year, with $100 million guaranteed. While nobody is suggesting Redmond has already reached Simmons's level, that contract illustrates where the market is heading. Interior defenders who consistently pressure quarterbacks are becoming almost as valuable financially as elite edge rushers. That's a major development for Minnesota, because if Redmond continues progressing the way he has, waiting another season could become extremely expensive. The projection is straightforward. If he simply repeats the level of play he displayed last season, there's a legitimate possibility he enters the conversation as one of the NFL's top defensive tackles. If that happens, his next contract could approach the upper tier of the market, potentially reaching around $30 million annually. That's exactly why the timing matters. Instead of allowing Redmond to play through another outstanding season before entering unrestricted free agency, Minnesota has an opportunity to negotiate from a position of strength today. Locking him up before another dominant campaign could save significant money while securing one of the defense's most important building blocks. And the production certainly supports having that conversation. Last season, Redmond established himself as one of the Vikings' most impactful defensive players. Beyond the raw numbers, his overall influence consistently showed up on film. One particularly revealing moment came during a sideline conversation involving broadcaster Greg Olsen. While speaking with an offensive coach from one of Minnesota's opponents, Olsen asked who the best player on the Vikings' defense was. The response wasn't one of the bigger national names. The answer was number 61, Jalen Redmond. That kind of respect from opposing coaching staffs often tells you far more than public rankings or highlight reels ever could. The coaches preparing game plans every week clearly recognized the challenge Redmond presented. His ability to disrupt plays from the interior became one of Minnesota's greatest defensive strengths. He recorded 12 tackles for loss and 6 sacks, while consistently creating pressure up the middle, something every defensive coordinator values because interior pressure is often more difficult for opposing offenses to handle than pressure coming from the edge. Even more impressive was his efficiency. According to the discussion, Redmond's pass rush success rate significantly exceeded the average for defensive tackles. His quick pass rush win rate, measuring how rapidly a defender defeats his blocker, ranked among the league's best. But his game isn't built solely on rushing the passer. He's also recognized as one of the NFL's strongest run defenders, capable of overpowering offensive linemen and disrupting running plays before they have a chance to develop. Those are exactly the qualities Minnesota wants, anchoring its defensive front. Perhaps the most exciting part for Vikings fans is that there's every reason to believe Redmond hasn't reached his ceiling yet. His first season with Minnesota showed promise. The following season represented a significant leap forward. Now, entering what should be the prime years of his career, the expectation is continued improvement rather than regression. If that happens, Minnesota's defensive line could become one of the league's most dangerous units. There's already optimism surrounding the group. If Caleb Banks develops into the player the organization hopes he'll become, Redmond's presence in the middle becomes even more valuable. Add contributions from Levi Drake Rodriguez, who projects as quality depth along the interior, alongside edge defenders like Dallas Turner and Andrew Van Ginkel, and suddenly the Vikings possess the ingredients for an incredibly disruptive front. That's exactly the vision defensive coordinator Brian Flores has been pursuing. Flores has built his reputation as one of football's most aggressive defensive minds, frequently dialing up creative blitz packages and overwhelming opposing quarterbacks with pressure from every angle. But even he understands the biggest advantage a defense can have: generating pressure with only 4 pass rushers. When a defensive line consistently wins without requiring additional blitzers, the rest of the defense gains tremendous flexibility. More defenders remain available in coverage, disguises become more effective, and opposing quarterbacks have fewer easy answers before the snap. Players like Jalen Redmond make that possible, which brings everything back to the original question: should Minnesota wait? Or should the front office move now before another breakout season dramatically increases the price? Based on the trajectory discussed here, the answer seems increasingly obvious. An extension today could protect the Vikings from entering a bidding war next offseason while rewarding one of the fastest-rising players on the roster. Between Sam Darnold's thoughtful reflections on his departure and the growing case for securing Jalen Redmond's future, one thing is becoming clear: this offseason continues to shape the long-term direction of the Minnesota Vikings in ways that could define the franchise for years to come. Now I want to hear from every Vikings fan watching. Do you think Minnesota made the correct decision by moving forward with J.J. McCarthy? And would you extend Jalen Redmond before the season begins? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Vikings news, rumors, and exclusive analysis. SKOL.